Hello, everybody. This is Roger Durling, Executive Director of the Santa Barbara International Film Festival, and I am deeply honored to welcome our three guests today. The director, George C. Wolfe of Rainey's Black Bottom, and the actors, Glynn, Turman, and Michael Potts. Those who know me know that I run the film festival, but I'm a huge, huge theater fan. And there's three gents in my book, Walk on Water. George C. Wolfe is responsible for those who don't know, the original production of Angels in America, Bringing the Noise, Bringing the Funk, Jelly's Last Jam, Shuffle Along, Caroline or Change, Elaine Stritch at Liberty, Top Dog Underdog. This is one of the greatest directors that currently working. And then Michael Potts, a theater veteran in the Prom. He was also I saw him in August Wilson's Jitney on Broadway. And Glynn Turman, Joe Turner's Come and Gone at the Mark Taper Forum, amongst other, the original production of Raisin in the Sun with Sidney Poitier. Welcome, gents. I'm deeply honored to have you here.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you.
After that introduction, and also I should point out that the ensemble is nominated for the Screen Actors Guild Award, as also as the Critics' Choice, among many other nominations. I'm going to start with George. George, can you tell us about your involvement with this production? You obviously are a theatrical director, but what I love about this movie is that you have found a way to make this very theatrical world a very vibrant cinematic world. Can you tell us about your involvement with this?
Well, at one point I had a conversation with Denzel Washington, and he asked me if I would direct it, and so I said yes, and then I started working with Ruben Santiago Hudson on the script. I believe Ruben had been hired before me, I believe, and so we started working, and it was and started playing around with it, and started sort of listening to the script in the sense, and digging into the original script to try to get signals and ideas and possibilities of translating this to film. And so, it would be, Ma Rainey has this great line that she says where she's talking to Irving, and she says, about I don't like it up here in the North, and I can take my ass back down South where I belong. And that was like going, oh, that's really striking, because you have 100,000 Black people on their way going up to Chicago. You got Ma Rainey going in the opposite direction. Well, why is that? And then as you dig into the history, you find out she was this showbiz entrepreneur. So let's see that, so that therefore when we see her in Chicago, checking everybody, checking a white policeman, checking her white manager, checking the owner of the studio, you understand she's not just a woman who goes around looking for places to go off. She is speaking from a place of power because she has power. So just digging into the material and, and going, oh, August set it in the winter. What wouldn't it be great if it was in the summer? Because summers in urban cities are hot and horrible and suffocating and all that other sort of stuff. So it was just digging in and playing and cutting things and opening up things and just trying to find a visual language that could complement and support the majesty of the spoken language in the piece.
You mentioned in the 10 plays that August Wilson wrote, he documents the Great Migration that happened from 1916 to the 1960s from the South to the North. One of the things that I love about your adaptation is that in the opening sequence, you show us this sort of visual migration that takes us from the tent in the South to Chicago. You
Yeah.
know, is can you tell us how did you arrive about that journey, that visual journey?
Well, I wanted to see Ma and her fans and what that experience was like in the South, and then Ma in the North. And I also wanted to make it clear that she's moving, she's a part of history, that there's this huge migratory process going on, which will transform the country, which will transform the rhythms of the country. And so I wanted her to put her at the center of that, so that you understood, her time and her place in history, and to also to give a context, and also to establish what there was a promise. There's a promise of what was going to happen when Black people left the South to the North, and clearly there was terrorism going on. There was lynching. There were Jim Crow laws. They were putting up statues of losers who had lost the Civil War and putting them in town squares like they should be celebrated, and doing all this incredibly insane stuff. All of this was happening. So of course people wanted to go to a place where there were better situations economically, but also what I wanted to embody that's the sense of the Southern Black community and what it was able to build and how it was able to support and sustain itself. So, because I think it's one of the things that I think August was exploring in a really fascinating way, which is, and I think it's so curious to me that this was the first play, because I think in many respects, all the other plays resonate in an interesting way about what happened to Black people when they left the South and went north, in a great way and in a complicated way. So this piece, even though not the first piece in the chronology, it feels like a bit of Ma Rainey's Black Bottom feels like a little bit of a preamble for the other plays. And it's interesting. So I don't know if that answers your question.
No, absolutely. No, thank you. Glynn, you've been in August Wilson plays before. There's a rhythm to his language. There is a exalted, visceral quality to his language. Can you tell us about working with his words?
Well, he obviously spent a lot of time in barbershops. Because the rhythm and the language and the storytelling is what I grew up with in Harlem as a 6-year-old, getting my first haircut, sitting on that stool with that booster chair in it, and getting a buzz clip as all the different players and pimps and hustlers and post office workers came into the barbershop, and you could spend the whole day in there just listening to the stories. Mm. And what he has done is he's captured all of that, because that's what the whole sequence with the band in that in that basement that the George constructed is the barbershop. Hey, everybody's loud and soft and crazy and hot and fanning, and laughing and passing, man, did you, that's the barbershop. Mm-hmm. And he's got every note of that is on the page. And that's what he's a master of. He's not a conductor. What is it? Who writes music? The
composer.
He composes.
Absolutely.
He composes music like listen to Ellington.
But Glynn, is it a difficult language to dive into? For an actor, Shakespeare is difficult to get.
Just like Shakespeare, it's difficult if you don't find the rhythm.
Okay.
iambic pentameter is the rhythm for Shakespeare.
Mm-hmm.
Bebop is the rhythm for August Wilson. And if you try to do anything other than that, if you're about, if you're about Marlon Brando, deep breaths and mumbling, you're gonna miss it. You're gonna throw the rhythm off.
Mhm.
Spit the lines out, get them out right, and get them out quick, and get them out correctly, and don't leave out the
Michael,
That's funny. That's a t-shirt.
Excuse me? Right? No, that's a t-shirt.
Yeah. Don't leave
August
out
Wilson, don't leave out the
Michael, George assembled a great group of actors that have a deep respect to theater. How important do you think that was, that all of you, Viola, Glynn, everybody have a deep, you guys are all theater actors and have a deep respect for it?
Well, it's going back to even the previous question of Glynn. It requires craft. It requires craft to do August Wilson. You don't walk in off the street. It requires craft to do Shakespeare. You just don't walk in off the street and do. I mean, you can, but you won't be able to do it well. And I think it was essential to the people that George assembled, brilliantly assembled. I mean, astounding. These people he assembled were people who have that level of craft and artistry, and also people who want to wrestle with text, who want to wrestle with story, who want to dig in and find truth, who want to fight in a sense, who want to have that conflict of ideas and emotions and the conflict of the language and personal experience to kind of tell the story, to make these people, to bring out these characters' humanity and their authenticity. So yeah, that's what George assembled, really. That's what he was able to do in an extraordinary way.
George, all of his plays take place in Pittsburgh, but for this one that is in Chicago, but you actually shot this one it takes place in Chicago, but you shot it in Pittsburgh. Is there an importance to that?
No, just, great locations. Pittsburgh is complicated, but it is a complicated place, just like most urban situations. But what they have, which is really, really thrilling, is the architecture, some really gloriously wonderful architecture. And so it was easy to find 1927 Chicago in Pittsburgh, and we found all the different neighborhoods, and the place where Levy discovers those shoes. That street had this, we were looking over there, and all of a sudden there was this borderline dilapidated Art Deco building. And it was just like, that's the shoe store. And we just spruced it up a little bit, but this beautiful little gem was just right there on this little complicated street. And so it just kept on delivering all these wonderful visual treats. And ultimately, the one extraordinary thing that Pittsburgh gave us was that group of extras for that tent show, because that was single-handedly the greatest group of extras that have ever been assembled in a movie, except for maybe D.W. Griffith's Intolerance. They were passionate and in period and generous. And that night, it was a Friday night, the end of the first week of shooting. And so, I don't care whatever happened, what Pittsburgh ever does, good, bad, right, or wrong, they will be forever, I will be ever indebted to them for delivering us that extraordinary group of extras who cheered on Ma Rainey in that tent. It was a glorious, wonderful night that I'll never forget.
It really was. Yeah,
it was.
And there was this, I keep on talking, there's this one woman, I made sure I got a close-up of her. She was 96, 97. I do not know her name. I should know. And and she'd been there. They'd been there since 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening, and it went on until about 2 or 3 in the morning. And at one point, I said one of the ADs over to tell her that she could go, that I have a close up on her, and so she can go home and rest. She says, "I'm not going. This reminds me of what it was like when I was little." And love, you know, and, so long story short, Pittsburgh was because it looked good, but ultimately it gave us some great people and a great energy.
In August Wilson plays, you have this larger than life characters that are contained in small you know, spaces, and you set it in this, you know, claustrophobic rehearsal room in the basement. Can you tell us about creating that space, George, and the importance of having that space?
Well, it's that there were, I had assorted images in my head. It started out, I said, I started talking to Mark Ricker. I thought maybe I wanted to viscerally evoke the South. I wanted to viscerally evoke the hull of a slave ship without spelling it out. And then after I went back and forth and said no window, and then he tried a window, and I said, okay, let's go with the window. Then it started to remind me of Caravaggio paintings where there was this exalted light coming down from above, and then the guys are throwing words around. And then the most potent image that I think served, hopefully for the actors, but also for the DP, and is that originally the room was a rectangle, and there was this meeting where Tobias, the DP, and Mark were there, and we were setting it up, and I said, bring in the columns closer. Bring them in closer, bring them in closer. And they were looking at each other like, George has gone insane, because how are we going to film down here? But I wanted it to feel like a boxing match, and I wanted it to be Raging Bull, but instead of punches, it's the aforementioned August Wilson via barbershop language, and people are flying words at each other as if they're punches, and you're keeping a score. And sometimes you retreat to your corner, and then sometimes you come back with a flurry of punches, and you keep going at each other and going at each other. And then all of a sudden, when the music happens, all the fighting goes away and they come together. And it's ironic and fascinating to me, just in terms of the structure of the piece, that at the end, they put their instruments away so that when it takes a tragic turn, the music isn't there to rescue them. There is no music that can bond them and allow them to release the tension. They are without music at that point in time, and at the end of a very long, hard, very suffocating day. So it was just playing around with the space and images, so that therefore it was suffocating, but it served as Michael and Glynn have talked about. The space could become like a trampoline or a launching pad for how this music of the language could fly.
And to Glynn and Michael, to the two of you, how did it feel to work in that space? To be in that contained basement?
Well, it was just as George said, it was a great springboard, because it evokes so many images and it evokes so many emotions. The hull of a ship at times, the closeness made us come in contact with one another. We did the scene there. It was cut to a degree, but it wasn't cut out. It was shorter than it was. But when we were filming it, it was quite something, because we couldn't get away from each other. It was the scene when Chadwick's character Levy is chasing Coleman with the knife around that space, and there was no place for him to go. There was no way he could get away from this attack, and we were all just making this wonderful dance that George choreographed, of in and out and in and out and ducking and parrying and trying to get away and trying to find some it was horrible. It was horrible. It was horrible. But that's so real. You know, that's so real when you're in, you know, if you've ever been unfortunate enough to be in a situation that's similar to that, how do you avoid the danger when it's right in your face, you know? And that's what that space provide us, you know. You try to you move a chair, you duck behind a pillar, you know. He swings at it, and you hit the pillar. This is in the way, and the door, and the door.
The pillars, the pillar is in the way. Everything is
in the way, you know. So
and the corners are dark, so you know, deliberately dark. So there's danger in the corner. It created this sense there's always danger in this space. It was hot, it was dark, it was suffocating. So there was always danger. And it was always, I always felt that the three of us were on one side of this ring and we had Levy had his own side all the time. It's like Levy owned that side of the ring, and it's the three of us against him.
George, you know, one of the moments that I love so much is the door that is locked. And then he finally kicks it open, and then we go into this alley, and the camera pans up, and then we see that, you know, the entrapment. You know, can you tell us about how you arrived to that powerful metaphor?
Well, the character mentions it a couple of times, and there was a big conversation about moving the door and the door and the door. And I was going like, why the hell is he so obsessed with this? And so just by asking that question, this image came to me, and to me, it's the ultimate metaphor. It became for me the ultimate metaphor for racism in America. It's like every 20, 30, 40 years in this country, there's this huge victory. And everybody goes, ha ha, it's all solved.
Yeah.
Then you barge through the door, and there are more walls. You barge through the Obama's president, the most recent one. You barge through the Obama presidency door, and then on the other side there are a bunch of walls, and that's where we are right now. And then, you know, and there's a gigantic march on Washington in 1963, and we barge through that door, and everybody feels really great. And a few weeks later, you know, the little girls get bombed coming down in that church. So it is, you know, there's the Civil War, there's the Emancipation, there's the Harlem Renaissance where Black brilliance is on display, and then boom, you know, the suffocation and the oppression and the poverty of the fascism that rose up all over the world in the 30s, and combined with the Depression. So it just became, and it was also Levy is a very interesting character to me for 9,000 reasons, but one of the things that he is operating from is this extraordinary sense of hope. He has this unbelievable sense of hope. He has so much hope that he goes out and buys yellow shoes, not black, not brown, yellow shoes, because his future is just going to be fabulous. And then and one day, all of that hope gets taken away from him. And so I wanted to come up with a visual metaphor that would drop breadcrumbs for the desperate act that he later does, you know, when he attacks, you know, this other character. And I wanted this just to show that he felt that sense of entrapment, and he felt that sense of hopelessness, so that therefore he did not know what else to do but other than to strike out. So it was there for to substantiate a character journey, but also to hopefully evoke a larger metaphor that hopefully some people got, and other people just got, oh, he's trapped, which is fine. I'll take that.
Speaking, of the yellow shoes, that's not something that was in the script. I mean, an August play. That's something you came up with.
Well, that was the lovely Ann Roth came up with that.
Oh, yeah.
With the actual color of the yellow shoes. Yes, no. That was one among her many contributions, and because they were just so I just said I wanted something fabulous and outrageous, and you can't get any more outrageous and clueless than yellow shoes in 1927. Where are you going to wear them? I mean, you can't wear them to that job at the post office. So
we've talked about the musical language, and then you gents had to play music. Glynn, you learned to play the piano, or you brushed up your piano playing skills?
No, I first started my story is that the piano in our home, which had been there, we've been in that house 20 something years. The piano in my home did not realize it was a piano. It thought it was a picture frame. It wasn't until doing the play at the Mark Taper, when I had to do this role, Toledo, that I started playing that piano. Billy Mitchell came in to help me in that production. In this production, I dusted off those chops that I had kind of sat down for the year that had passed, and then picked up those chops again under the hand of Wolfe Marcellus, which, that's batting 2 for 2. I mean, that's picking in high cotton, no matter what, And so I said to myself, and since then, even here in Mississippi, I've got a piano in right over there, that I'm not going to turn this piano loose again. It is part of my world now. And so
that's Branford calling.
That's perfect.
Yeah, that was Branford. Yes, that's perfect. So to answer your question, no, I did not play the piano. Do I play now? Yes. Yes, I play now.
Yes.
Yes.
Is that more barbershop talking?
Michael, I want to include Viola Davis in the conversation. She's brilliant at this. Can I
just add in one thing? Jimmy,
sure.
Can I add in one thing?
Sure,
Branford
go ahead.
Marcellus told me that Michael Potts is a brilliant bass player. I just want to add that in. So he said that about him.
And how do you feel about that, Michael?
I fooled him. I fooled him. Acting. I fooled him.
Had you played before?
No, never touched the bass before.
So,
you get excited. You get the offer to do that. You go, wow, he's gonna do it. He plays the bass. I don't know how to play the bass.
And
so
you were never
became the challenge.
And you were never. And you were never intimidated. Here comes the great Branford Marcellus, and I'm supposed to pretend.
Oh, yeah, that was a great deal of intimidation. Are you kidding? Are you kidding? How could there not be? I mean, number one, you had the rest of this cast that George assembled. Branford Marcellus is in charge of the soundtrack and the music. Yeah, and you have to learn to play an instrument you've never touched before. Yes, the level of intimidation and anxiety was high. But you learn it. You don't want to be the weak link. You don't want to be the weak link. So you get at it. You do it. You learn it.
Mm-hmm. George, Viola Davis, how did you guys arrive to the gold teeth, the grease paint, her costume, tell us about her metamorphosis.
Well, I mean, a lot of that's just, one historically true. It's, Ma Rainey had gold teeth. She had a horsehair wig. She had a necklace around her neck that was gold coins. She had an eagle on a flag-like structure behind her. It's complicated because there's a finite amount of information about Ma Rainey, the historical figure, but it's there. Ironically enough, I discovered, which I did not know while we were filming, but when I started to put together with the editor the very end of the visuals for the end, there are literally only 7 photographs of Ma Rainey in existence. Period. That's it. And that became really, really fascinating. And then everybody just dived in. Mia Long, who made the wigs, she found mail order horsehair, and she literally boiled it to get rid of the horse's lice and manure. And then she made that wig one horsehair strand by one horsehair strand. Made it, Viola works with her makeup person, this guy named Sergio, and they went off and playing, and with you having available to them the fact that there was no makeup designated for different shades of Black skin. And so people very frequently, you had to make do. One of the things that was really fascinating to me, Sergio, who's from Spain, was talking about how his aunts told them that during the Civil War there, women would crush berries and use anything that they could find to create makeup because it wasn't in existence. And then there was this one time I worked with this makeup, phone's ringing, I don't know what to do about it. That I worked with this makeup woman on Lackawanna Blues, and she told me that the chorus girls from the Apollo would take shoe polish and mix it with water and put it around their eyes to get that smoky eye effect. So I just love the idea of Ma had created and crafted her own idea and her own identity. And Viola was inspired in part by whatever happened to Baby Jane. So it was so you have history, and then you have a bunch of individual artists, getting inspiration from history and coming up with this ultimate composite that I think is both startling and fresh and odd and arresting and historically grounded as much as it was grounded in imagination. So it was it's like so much of what happened on this film. When you are working with, I remember at one point in college I was directing something and I was having a conversation with the composer, and the cast was over in the corner making noise. And they just kept on making noise. And I was saying, guys, we're trying to solve a problem. And they were over in the corner making more noise. And just at the point where I was starting to get frustrated with them, they were over in the corner playing around with the piano, and they had solved the problem that I was discussing with the composer, who was incapable of solving the problem. Just by making noise over there, they were solving the problem. And I think that's one of the thrilling things about collaboration, is that if everybody in the room is smart, and miracle of miracles, everybody in the room was smart on this project, people come up with glorious solutions. Mm-hmm. And if everybody is working on the same project, and I don't mean that literally, I mean that if everybody understands what their responsibility is to the text and to the film and to the vision, then glorious and wonderful things can happen.
And Michael, tell me about working with Viola and seeing her in that transformation.
Oh, well, she's a titan. I thought it was amazing the way she embodied the character. That's who she is. She fully transformed into Ma Rainey. And I would always say, she'd take off her regular shoes, Ma's regular shoes, and put on these horrid looking house shoes, and still maintain that same power that same presence as when she was higher. There was so much heft and weight. She was a colossus. I mean, we know as an actor she's a colossus, but she fully embodied, and more importantly, she embraced all of it. She embraced every bit of who Ma is supposed to be, and she embraced it without apology. You know what I'm saying? She wasn't trying to be anybody's image or a Hollywood image of what it's supposed to look like. She embraced the authenticity and the truth of who this woman was. And that was in her every movement, in her every, you know, the way she would turn her head, the way she would kind of cut her eye at you sometimes. She fully embodied who this was. You had no doubt when she was in the room who had the power.
And George, one question about the editing. You know, I've seen August Wilson plays, and they're known for he takes his time. There is they're lengthy pieces, but Ma Rainey, your Ma Rainey, there's a swiftness to it. There is a rhythm to it. You know, can you tell us about the editing process, and how did you arrive at this length and the swiftness that this has?
Well, I mean, everything that we filmed, there was nothing that ended up on the editing floor. There was a certain amount of cutting that was done, but it's you know, one of the things that I think is, in a weird way, my inspiration was, if you've ever been in a room with a group of actors, one actor, not these actors, just actors in general. If you've been in a room with a group of actors and they're hanging out and they're having a drink, one actor is telling the story while every other actor in the room is trying to figure out what story they're going to tell to top the story that is currently being told. And so the language tumbles out. And one of the things that was so the language spills out. It's also one of the things that is really interesting to me is these are Black people in 1927, and there are laws legislating what they can and can't do. There are laws legislating where they can and can't go. And so, but one of the things that you are in charge of is your own mythology, your own sense of who you are. So that therefore, what you can do, you can craft your own story and who you are and what you believe. And you do so, I think, with a ferocity and an intensity that is because you own that. I own my story. I own my words. Nobody can take that away from me. So that therefore, when they're in the room and they're hurling things around, and as Michael Potts pointed out, Levy is challenging every single thing about what they think they know, because he's young and a smart knucklehead. And so he's going to challenge them. My story becomes my armor. My story becomes my truth. And so you don't announce your truth politely. You announce your truth with the ferocity of how you've lived your life and what you've survived. So that informs the language, you know, and as Glynn made this point earlier, it's not like, and then this happened, and then this happened, because while you say that, somebody else is taking over the story. Somebody is taking over the story and is ruling it, and you have lost your spotlight. And so there's a sense of ferocity. And one of the things that I think is what's really interesting, I think all the great American playwrights, I would read O'Neill. Eugene O'Neill, and I'd go, oh, Lord, this Jesus Christ, this is taking a long time, But then when you dig inside of it, you discover the ferocity of the storytelling that's underneath it. And, and Tennessee Williams, nobody is allowed the space to be languid. Mm-hmm. They are ferociously trying to claim their space. So internally, that's what the actors were fully embodying, the ferocity of their beliefs and the ferocity of who they are. And then externally, it was this fun boxing match that you were playing around with. And to me, the whole thing ultimately is a giant music composition. It's a brilliantly crafted music composition that has underneath it, it's not just arbitrary notes. The notes are connected to passion and power and belief and fear and doubt and command and illusions and truth and all that good stuff that makes us really makes for great acting and makes for great characters, because it's what we all do. We all have truths and illusions about ourselves, and we ferociously believe them.
Wow. And then I do have to ask you about Chadwick. Glynn, can you tell us about working with Chadwick?
Well, working with Chadwick was wonderful, really wonderful. He was a professional. That's was wonderful to see, that he's out of the young generation, new generation. He took his position with a lot of respect. He dealt out a lot of respect to all of us that was involved, as a professional. And so that, once I've realized that, I was able to relax, knowing that he was going to bring his share of that component to the table. I was then able to engage him as a human being, just for who he was as a person, and found out that he was a cool cat. He was a really cool dude. Found out he was somebody that I enjoyed being around, that he could contribute to the narrative or the fun or the drama or the whatever was going on in the small tent that we all shared while waiting for the next shot, and that he was able to contribute to those conversations that had nothing to do with the craft, but everything to do with everyday human being content, and he wasn't afraid to share his side of that journey, with us. And so it made it fun talking about his girlfriend who was on the set. It made it fun watching him and Denzel spar. He was a great boxer, a judo cat, and Denzel is a boxer as well. And I would watch them spar with one another, So that was a wonderful thing to see. So all of these things that were not related to the business, we were privy to. And that was the side that really intrigued me about him,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And last question, Denzel has committed to producing all of August Wilson plays. George, what do you think about that commitment and the importance of
is there something else I can help with?
Of doing all of August Wilson's plays?
Well, I just think it's I didn't get that. Theater is a really interesting thing. Its potency is in its fragility, and everybody who is there that night while that play is happening are part of this wonderful, miraculous, hopefully wonderful and miraculous evening of storytelling and human behavior, and then it's gone. And if you're lucky, you get to do it again the next night, and so on and so forth for as long as the show runs. And then once it's gone, it lives in memory. It doesn't live; it lives in memory. It only lives in memory, and so that the fact of that is wondrous and painful at the exact same time. And one of the things that was so thrilling to me is that when it started streaming on Netflix on December 18th, it was literally being seen all over the world. And the early numbers were coming back, and 3 or 4 or 5 days later, and somebody was talking about that the numbers were really high in Brazil, who was watching it in Brazil, and who was watching it in Africa, and who was watching it in London. And it was just, I felt sort of thrilled and humbled that the world was experiencing not only our work that we have collectively done, but they were hearing this language and this storytelling. And and hopefully finding themselves inside of this material and the language and the stakes of what these people were going through. So I think it's great. I mean, I think it's great. People will continue to do, stage versions of all of August's plays, and that's a great thing. And they'll find their own truths inside of it, and they'll find their own power and command, and they'll go on their journeys, and they will discover what they need to discover. But also simultaneously, there are now two versions of his plays that are going around the world, and over the next X number of years, another will be added and another one will be added. And that's a great, great, great thing. It's a great, great thing because it's smart work and an important work and loving work being shared with audiences all over the world.
Well, you guys have done incredible work, the three of you, and it's been an honor to chat with you. Seriously, I've been a big fan of the three of you individually and now communally. So thank you so much for being here, and wish you the best.
Well, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you so
Roger.
much, guys.
Thank you.
Cheers.
It was fun. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah, guys.